Okay, it's story time this morning. The other day, we had our little truck, little red fire truck here in a public park in Richland, Washington, and this lady pulls up next to us, and she was all excited that we were doing a little pushback against the LGBTQ crowd. And she began to tell us a story about her going to the Kennewick Library a few days earlier and seeing a big display of LGBTQ books at the entrance of the library. So we packed up and drove over there to take a look for ourselves. And sure enough, what did we find? Exactly what she told us. Now, this isn't really anything new for us. I mean, we've been dealing with this problem for a very long time. Back about 10 years ago, my wife was working as a librarian in a small town in the Yakima Valley, and lo and behold, they started putting these LGBT gay-friendly books on the shelves in the elementary school where she worked. So we began to speak out against it, and after a few years, eventually they had to pay her to go away because she wouldn't shut up. Now, people sometimes have an issue with us driving our truck around because it's like in your face, right? But you know what? We're not called to negotiate with the devil. We're called to cast out demons. And that's the problem that we have with a lot of churches today. I have actually been begged by numerous pastors to not park this truck anywhere near their church. Now that's pretty pathetic if you ask me. Now, I can kind of understand where they're coming from. I mean, I've been a pastor, so you have to appease a lot of the shallow-minded and weak-willed, fearful people, and the people that are not very well educated. The ones that are still drinking milk, they're not able to eat meat, any strong food, spiritually speaking. But the problem is, sooner or later, they have to eat meat. I mean, the gays have come out of the closet. I think it's time that we come out of the closet as Christians. We need to start confronting issues publicly. And that's how this type of thing has taken over the public school system. It's a sad commentary these days. A lot of pastors want to just preach to the choir. Well, I've been a pastor, so I understand how that works. But I'm through with preaching to the choir. I want to get out and preach to people who actually need to hear the gospel, not just come and sing a few songs and have a 2-minute prayer session in the morning. So that's why we do what we do. We get out and mix it up with people. We get out and stand on a busy intersection and address whatever issue happens to pop up. And if you really want to know, it's amazing how many of the gay crowd, and even a lot of Christians, that say, well, the Bible Jesus didn't really address the gay issue. Oh yeah? Tell you what, let's go inside the house. I'll break out a Bible and we'll find out what the Bible actually says about the gay issue, the LGBTQ crowd. How about we start in the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through that which has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. Therefore, God gave them over in the lusts of their heart to impurity, that their bodies might be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions. For their women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural, And in the same way, also the men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire towards one another, men with men committing indecent acts, receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. Any questions? Now, some may argue, well, that's Apostle Paul, you know how he was. He had his own issues. Well, let's look at the little book of Jude, just before the book of Revelation. Tiny little book, only a couple of pages long. I'm going to start in verse 5. It says, "Now I desire to remind you, though you knew all things once for all, that the Lord, after saving a people out of the land of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode, he has kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day." And then it makes a comparison here. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they in the same way as these indulged in gross immorality and went after strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. Now, there's some question about what the heck is this guy talking about here. Verse 6, where it talks about the angels who did not keep their own domain. Well, this is alluding to something back in Genesis chapter 6, where it says the sons of God went into the daughters of men. And as a result of that came the Nephilims. That means the fallen ones. So this is alluding to angelic beings having sex with humans. Now that's a very hot topic. But the scary part about that, Jesus says in the last days, it's going to be just as it was in the days of Noah. And if you look at what it says back in Genesis about that, things were really corrupt, and God was so frustrated and ticked off at mankind because of their sins that he destroyed the whole planet with a flood. So if that's what we're to look forward to, chances are this little picture here about Sodom and Gomorrah and the angelic sins with men, chances are that's the type of thing that we're going to begin to see in our day and age. And you know, I am 68 years old, and in the past 40 years of me being a Christian, a little over 40 years now, I have seen things spiral downward like unbelievable. My parents would have never dreamed of such a thing. My grandparents especially would have never dreamed of such a thing. I mean, to go into a public library and see books that are designed for nothing more than to pervert the minds of young people. I mean, that would have nobody would have stood for that 50 years ago. Or when my grandparents were kids, I mean, they had libraries that were being built all over right around the turn of the century. And nobody would have stood for that. They'd have thrown the books out, or they'd have burned the library down. But now you can't even say anything, or they come after you in court. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to say something, and we're going to say it publicly out on the street. And if my little truck shows up in your church parking lot, you better not make much of a fuss, because I'll be out in front of your church with a picket sign addressing your problem. In closing, let me read a few verses out of the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 6. "And he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of water of life without cost. He who overcomes shall inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake of fire, which burns with fire, or the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.